So, as you can imagine, Berlin, being one of the most attractive capitals in Western Europe, is grappling with a shortage of affordable housing. On the one hand, the reason for this is a massive influx of population that happened over the past 2 decades, myself included. And the other is the commodification of housing, which is straining already overburdened housing system. And it became virtually impossible to rent an affordable apartment. As this photo shows, this is for a 150 meters long queue for a viewing of an affordable apartment in Berlin last year. The term commodification, we heard it already before today, refers to housing being turned into a commodity which can be traded on the market, and this is especially problematic in the case of housing because it's not only considered to be a human right, but it's also a resource necessary for a well-being of any individual. And the use value of housing should never be overshadowed by the market value of it, and yet this is exactly what it happened. So I'm going to speak today a little bit about how predominantly civil society is fighting against commodification in Berlin, what are the instruments that are being used in this struggle, and also how we need to rethink housing in order to mitigate the negative effects. In order to do so, I will also refer briefly to a very specific recent history of Berlin in the light of design and policy of housing. And at the end, I'm going to show a couple of built projects that are then questioning how can architecture as a built form contribute to these efforts. So Berlin has a long history of affordable housing or socially engaged housing, and it goes all the way back to the middle of the 19th century. Yet I'm going to fast forward to this pivotal moment in history in 1989, the fall of Berlin Wall, and consequently in 1990, the reunification of Germany. And this is the moment when the government of Helmut Kohl also adopted a more liberal economic policy and abolished Wohngemeinnützigkeit, which is a concept that roughly translates as public housing or non-profit housing. And this has been for the longest time the cornerstone of provision of affordable housing in Germany, and this system allowed for non-profit housing companies to receive tax exemptions and subsidies in exchange for their commitment to operate in a non-profit basis and provide affordable housing. So this moment in 1990 marked a turning point in housing policy, emphasizing privatization, liberalization, and deregulation, with the abolishment of non-profit housing further promoting these conditions. So in the years following reunification, the ambitions to reinstate the city not only as a capital of reunited Germany, but also as a capital of Europe, implied both numerous renovation works as well as new grand investments, including extensive new housing projects. However, the Berlin Senate did not anticipate the population decline that followed. East Berliners moved en masse to former West Germany, leaving entire residential neighborhoods abandoned, while many West Berliners, mostly middle-class residents, migrated to the outskirts of Brandenburg. So together, these shifts led to a total collapse of housing market. So at the turn of the millennium, Berlin found itself in a deep crisis. One of the strategies to consolidate the public budget was to sell off the public property, including undeveloped public land, often centrally located following the footprint of the former division. In 2000, Liegenschaftsfonds Berlin was founded, a company that took over the management and the commercialization of public property. So until its dissolution in 2014, when it became a part of Berlin Immobilien Management, Liegenschaftsfonds sold around 10,000 plots and properties, amounting to approximately an area of 15,000 hectares, which is equivalent of roughly 21,000 football fields of land was sold, and earned the state of Berlin around 2.3 billion euros. So the neoliberal change of attitude toward home ownership in a predominantly rental-based economy together with the influx of international capital, instigated a housing construction drive in the period after 2008 crisis. So since 2013, the number of apartments in German capital has increased annually by a double-digit percentage. Many of the new builds, they take the form of the both individual buildings as well as whole new quarters, sprang up in central areas of the city. This condition provided developers with a unique window of opportunity to redevelop and redefine historic districts primarily for affluent buyers. The image on the right shows a development that's called the Charleston. And this is a residential development which is built on one of these stretches of land near Potsdamer Platz. And today, a 3-room apartment would roughly cost you 3,500 euros. So non-transparent sale of public land led to a proliferation of commodified housing, sparking strong opposition from the civil society, which called for more transparent public land sale and management, and questions who these new developments were truly intended to serve. So this diagram illustrates various strategies to resist commodification of housing and also to reimagine it beyond conventional norms. Many of these strategies are interconnected, drawing inspiration from contemporary practices in Berlin. The diagram highlights the complexity of the landscape and shows a range of instruments and strategies which are each contributing uniquely but are insufficient on their own. So we heard this many times today, and I think it's a valid point. We need to imagine housing beyond land ownership. This essentially speaks about decoupling ownership of the land from the ownership of the building. There is an established model, which is the leasehold. The leasehold is even rooted in the law, which exists in Germany for more than 100 years, and again implies decoupling or different ownerships over the building and the land, which also allows for a building to be sold under different conditions and also much cheaper. And then there is community land trust, and I think Anna was also speaking about it today. This originates from an Anglo-Saxon space, and in Germany there is an initiative since 2018, which hasn't been fully operational, but in essence, the difference between the leasehold and community land trust is in ownership, which is in the first case individual, and in the second it's communal. So actually, community land trust model is not for everyone. It's really intended to take the land off the market and really take care of the ones who are below the certain income. Then the second set of instruments, imagine, is housing beyond traditional home ownership. So first of all, there is a rental policy in Germany, which protects the renters. Germany has the second lowest share of homeowners in all OECD countries. The first one is Switzerland. And Berlin is a city of renters. Only around 15% of all housing are owner-occupied housing. And housing policies in Germany create strong incentives to rent rather than to buy property. Transfer taxes on property purchases are high, and there is no mortgage tax deductions for owner-occupiers. Renters are generally protected against evictions, and the landlords are obliged to make larger repairs in the apartment. However, the Statute of Berlin is promoting ownership. There is a sentence in it that sort of is speaking for the ownership of apartments. The rental policy in Berlin might protect tenants, but it's not going to secure or guarantee affordable rents. Affordability can, however, be achieved through cooperative membership. So there are over 80 housing cooperatives in Berlin, some of which are founded more than a century ago. Cooperatives own some 12% of all apartments in the city. And in exchange for membership, cooperative will offer their members a stable, generally affordable rent, fostering a committed relationship to secure housing. Another path to affordability is renting from one of the 6 state-owned associations. again, some of which are dating back to the beginning of the 20th century, which collectively own something like 360,000 apartments. A further model, which ensures rent stability and affordability, is the syndicate model. The Mietshäuser Syndikat, or the Tenement Housing Syndicate, is a non-profit model based on shared ownership of housing projects. The syndicate provides financial and legal support for projects in which it holds partial ownership with voting rights, while rents paid within each project contribute to funding other communal projects. Shared ownership, along with veto rights, ensures that the project can never become fully privatized, thereby keeping it permanently off the market. Thinking housing beyond top-down approach. Civil engagement plays an important role in shaping the city, so ever since 1970s, citizen participation has served as a democratic tool in urban development. Meanwhile, the squatting movement has been very influential in both West and East Berlin, also after the reunification, and left a legacy of taking initiative to shape one's own living space. Numerous initiatives, such as 100% Tempelhofer Feld, or Haus der Statistik, or Kotti & Co., or Stadt von unten, for instance, that prevented the private selling of or selling to a private investor of the central Dragoner areal, are rooted in specific locations, and other groups are beyond specific sites and promote democratic city planning and management. One example is, for instance, Stadt Neudenken. It's an initiative that is going to have its 40th roundtable this month. One of the most prominent initiatives is Deutsche Wohnen Enteignen. Maybe you've heard of it. That's a movement that's advocating for reappropriation of Deutsche Wohnen, which is a company that owns a lot of apartments, and after the merge with Vonovia, they're the biggest owner of real estate property in Germany. And Deutsche Wohnen Enteignen is fighting for reappropriation of all housing that's in the hands of companies that own more than 3,000 apartments. And in 2021, the movement made a referendum, and 59% of all Berliners voted for the reappropriation. And ever since, I think the city made an expert commission to investigate what are the legal bounds of this of appropriation. And despite the positive findings, I think nothing yet really happened. I know the initiative is very mad about that. And there are referendums, right, that are therefore tools for direct democracy. Another referendum held in 2014 showed that public is against building on a former airfield named Tempelhof and retained the usage of it as a public park. The cornerstone of the bottom-up approach to urban planning are self-initiated projects. Probably the most famous model are Baugruppen, namely a group of individuals that comes together in purchase and development of a housing project. And this model has lost its popularity recently because of the lack of land that can be sold to them. And there is, of course, a challenge with this model, which is to which extent can such housing project be accessible to also diverse groups and not only to well-educated middle-class families. Another strategy is to also imagine housing beyond normative living arrangements. So since its inception, collective housing has been predominantly tailored to accommodate a nuclear family, namely heteronormative couples with mostly one or two children. In the present day, speculative and commodified housing aimed at unspecified user remains tailored with the family in focus. However, the reality in Berlin is very different. It's more than 50% are single occupant households, and then another 30% are two-people households, so more than 80% are actually not families. And this highlights the variety of living arrangements beyond the nuclear family that must be considered when thinking or designing housing. One typology that caters to single individuals who prefer not to live or age alone is a cluster apartment. We mentioned it again today. This concept combines several minimal single-person units, typically featuring 1 or 2 rooms, a private bathroom, and an optional kitchenette, with spatial shared areas for cooking, dining, and socializing. The first cluster apartment emerged around 15 years ago in cooperative housing project in Switzerland, and this typology has since gained a mainstream popularity. Recently, also, Berlin saw development of a couple of projects that are aimed at very specific groups. One of them is called Living Diversity 2. It's a newly built 7-story building which provides approximately 70 barrier-free apartments, including 1 care apartment and 2 therapeutical shared apartments, along with spacious communal areas and a range of neighborhood services. The housing is primarily serves single gay senior citizens, but also older lesbian women, trans, intersex people, as well as younger LGBTQ individuals. Another planned project is an inclusive Rat und Tat lesbian housing project and a queer sociocultural center, which is primarily aimed at aged lesbian women. And finally, thinking housing beyond the free market. So after the fall of the Berlin Wall, housing policy shifted towards liberalization, deregulation, and privatization. However, in response to escalating housing crisis, the local government is reintroducing regulatory measures, including Berlin model of cooperative development. I think it's similar to Helsinki mix. Basically, it requires project developers to cover costs of social, technical, and green infrastructure, such as kindergartens or playgrounds, necessary or impacted by their housing projects. To promote social diversity, developers also must ensure that 30% of all future housing is designated as affordable. The ban on misuse of living space came into force in 2014. This protects living space from misuse through vacancy, demolition, and conversion into commercial space or holiday homes. After years of non-transparent sales of public property, the city of Berlin, again around 2014, adopted a transparent policy known as concept tendering. And basically, where there is a public interest at stake, properties are no longer sold to a highest bidder, but to the applicant with the most compelling concept of both the use and the development of the area. A tool that sadly remained unapplied was a rent cap. It was introduced in 2020 as part of the new law proposed by a ruling coalition led by the center-left Social Democratic Party to curb rising rental costs. The law required landlords to adjust rents to an acceptable level based on each location and the building's standard, applying not only to properties that are younger than or built before 2014, because one of the pillars of government's fight for new housing is also to build new housing, or there is an idea that this will solve the housing crisis. And lastly, the aforementioned Wohngemeinnützigkeit, or non-profit housing, which was abolished in 1990, was reintroduced this year. The initiative was made by the left-wing and Green parties back in 2015. And in the future, socially oriented companies, associations, and foundations will be able to provide subsidized housing and benefit from the comprehensive tax relief. And the prerequisite will be to offer rent below the market rent. So I'm going to introduce now 3 case studies of housing in Berlin that more or less are combining some of these strategies. The first one is called Spreefeld. It's a project consisting of 3 residential buildings along the banks of the river Spree. And it was designed by 3 architecture studios, Capanetto Schöning, Fatkol, and Bar Architects. And the project was completed in 2014, but it was initiated in 2007 when a very successful campaign to Think Media Spree was active, and this initiative was aimed to halt a large investor-led development on the riverbank of Berlin, of River Spree, that would restrict the public access to the river. So the important component of this project is the public access to the riverbank, which also then informed the architecture in a sense that there are very generous terraces, as well as roof garden terraces, communal roof garden terraces on it. And also a specificity of this time is that the land was quite cheap back then, so relatively inexpensive land allowed for a lower density, which would be unthinkable by today's standards. The project was initiated by a cooperative that was formed for this reason. Yet the path to turn the wasteland to building land was not easy, and the foundation that was supposed to step in with the money backed out. So another individual stepped in with their own private capital, but the condition was to add a clause to the contract that says that after the completion, the apartments can be bought per building cost. I mean, the cost of the apartment is going to be as high as the building cost. And this sort of destroyed the project. So at the moment, the project is a hybrid of cooperative and owners association, where the majority of residents bought their apartments, allowing apartments to be sold on the open market or to be inherited, which is different to a cooperative logic. The ground floor spaces are designed for public use and include offices as well as so-called option spaces, which host workshops, music rooms, and sports rooms that are available to use by members, but they can also be rented out. So beyond being self-initiated or even self-built at times, this the housing development also pioneers the cluster apartments in Berlin, and it's actually, the first cluster apartment built. You can see the private rooms in purple. There's 6 of them, and they're adjacent to communal rooms, which are in red, which consist of dining and eating and also living spaces. The second example is a roof extension called Huspeplic. This project is under construction, it's not finished yet, and it's designed by Berlin-based Co-op Disco architects. The project is self-initiated, rooted in a strong sense of community and solidarity, with the support from before-mentioned tenement housing syndicate or Miethäuser Syndikat. The project began with the purchase of an old 4-story building from 1899, acquired at the auction after intense negotiation with the Liegenschaftsfonds Berlin. And with the help of Miethäuser Syndikat, the residents bought the building and undertook the renovation themselves. The current 35 residents, ranging in age from their 20s to their 40s, including 5 children, come from diverse and sometimes cases vulnerable life situations. The project aims to diversify its community further through open applications, self-management of the house. Self-management of the house demands significant time and effort, with residents organized in working groups to oversee various aspects of cohabitation. Decisions are made in regularly planner sessions with a structured plan in place to manage the maintenance of community shared areas. So each of the upper floors, which you can see on the left-hand side, are shared apartments. This is the relationship between the flatmates are very close and familiar, and they have formed a support structure in terms of care work. The communal kitchens on each floor are central meeting points for shared flat and sometimes even for the whole house community. And increase in the number of children also made some new requirements with the help of external workshops for which they set aside a small budget each year. They were able to resolve potential conflicts and establish a successful coexistence. And you see their wishes are drawn on this drawing. In 2019, they decided to create additional living space by extending the roof. And together with the architects, the community analyzed the current needs and wishes of all residents, which informed the extension design. The new floor will include several rooms for communal use and spaces for new living arrangements tailored to the evolving needs of the community. The plan on the left shows the extended roof, and in addition to private rooms, the extension includes more bathrooms and also flexible joker rooms. A timber construction was chosen as a sustainable, low-cost option that residents can also work then on themselves. However, a dry rot infestation complicated the roof work, delaying the project and limiting the reuse of the wood. Despite this, some materials, such as roof tiles, could be repurposed, supporting a circular approach to construction. And the last example bears the name of the streets. It's called Linear 38 to 39. This 7-story building was designed by a general planner, Schäfer Wenninger Project, who are pioneers in timber construction, and it was completed in 2019 on a plot of land which is directly adjacent to the railroad tracks in Wedding District. The building is divided into 3 sections, and they are connected with each other with the outdoor staircases that you can see on the image. So from the 2nd floor upwards, the building consists of pure timber construction, including elevator shaft. And inside the building, load-bearing timber components remain visible on the ceilings, beams, and columns, while untreated Douglas fir serves as an exterior cladding. And in these photos, the building is already some 5 years old, so you can see the uneven weathering of the facade. Thanks to the prefabricated wooden components, the building was completed in only 1 year. The building is owned by a cooperative called Am Ostseeplatz, which was founded in 2000, and it's one of the youngest cooperatives in Berlin. The project received the support from the Senate in the program called Experimental Multi-Story Residential Construction in Berlin. The low rent was possible also by acquiring a cheap piece of land, as it was deemed commercial and not attractive due to its location next to rail tracks. As a result, approximately half of the apartments are reserved for members with a VBS certificate, which is granted to low-income earners. And now they're paying 6.5 euros per square meter cold rent. And in the Charleston that we saw at the beginning, this amount is 18.3, so 12 euros per square meter more. The ground floor houses social facilities such as kitchen and the night cafe of Berlin Association for Helping Homeless, a social welfare center, and a shared flat for people with dementia, a multilingual daycare center, and the Berlin office of the international street newspaper Arts of the Working Class. The building offers total 89 apartments, and the majority are organized in cluster apartments. Each private mini apartment, that again you can see in the purple, have its own little bathroom and also a little kitchenette. And the community space includes, the community includes both assisted and independent residents, encompassing individuals with various physical, mental, or psychological disabilities, as well as those from migrant or refugee backgrounds. So, what are the conclusions that we can draw from these insights? First, there is no single path to decommodification. Instead, a network of strategies is needed to reinforce housing as a public infrastructure and to envision it beyond traditional frameworks. Second, a socially oriented local government is a crucial ally in the fight against commodification. Third, it's also beneficial to work with specific communities and tailor the design to their needs, which might not be those of nuclear families. And finally, we heard today, as architects, we don't always have much agency, and we are mostly service providers, but we might as well choose who are we going to provide this service for. Thank you.
Thank you. Just one question which you, I think, partly already answered, but how is affordable housing defined in Berlin?
How is affordable housing defined in Berlin?
What does it mean?
What is
affordable?
6.5 euros per square meter.
6.5.
That's affordable, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the prices may vary, but no, sorry, this is social housing. I'm sorry.
Social housing. It was more like 12.
More like 10.
More like 10.
Yeah.
10 euros per square meter for the rent.
Yeah.
Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? If no, then we can move on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.